thanks all the attendees for joining us on the fourth panel for today. It's titled Organising to Win, What's the Role of Legal Sector Workers? The panel's convened by Trade Union Legal Sector Workers United, a branch of the United Voices of the World, and particularly huge shout out to Margot for organising, coordinating stuff on this call. It's incredible. So my name is Farheen. I'm involved in LSWU and I'm currently a public law caseworker. We have been really excited for this panel, which seeks to interrogate the role of legal sector workers in respect to mass movements, and to borrow the well-known Audre Lorde metaphor, whether there's scope to rely on the tools at our disposal as both lawyers and workers to dismantle the house itself, the systems around us. Can we rely on the legal arena to actively pursue radical abolitionist demands for movements here and across the world, or do the legal challenges we level on behalf of individuals and NGOs simply result in the proliferation of more law based on essentially liberal principles? And I think this conversation is particularly interesting in the context of the hostile environment, as this whole conference is titled. Access to good quality legal representation for asylum seekers, refugees and migrants, the most vulnerable, is often touted as a key issue to ensure that clients are provided with access to justice in their cases with their individual factual matrices. And the definition of refugee is widely recognized and closely adhered to. But whilst the importance of individual rights can't be ignored in the context of individuals seeking right to remain or resisting deportations and removals, it's often the construct of the border itself and the underpinning principles of a nation state's immigration systems and other, associated systems, the penal system to name one, which act as the source of the problem. So legal challenges in the arena of tackling the hostile environment have seen wins for some individuals and potentially a narrow class of others, but often they rely on essentially an acceptance of the rules of the game. That, for example, in the context of immigration within their borders, nation states seeking to restrict individuals' rights to access things can do so, but it might be unfair in an individual client's case, or that the particular system deployed doesn't provide adequate safeguards against such unfairness arising. Or even that those fleeing dangers, certain ones may be allowed to stay, whilst others may be left without any form of leave. So given the material impacts of the law and the potential risks of legal sector workers becoming mere cogs in the system, it therefore becomes really crucial to unpack what our role may be as organised legal sector workers trying to resist the system that we're part of somewhat. So to further understand how and whether the law could usefully be subverted for radical ends, we have some incredible panelists today, all of whom have offered their time on a Sunday afternoon to put forward their helpful takes on how we can organise to win. So without further ado, apologies for the long intro, I'll introduce the first speaker, who I think is now here to speak next. Do you want to give a brief intro, Michael?
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Michael. I was a member of the group called Freed Voices, which has now been dissolved. I spent 2.5 years of my life in detention, having been in the UK since I was 12 years old. I came out of detention December 2014, and since then I've been campaigning for reform and abolition of detention. Over the past couple of years, my team had worked on the 28-day time limit as a strategy to limiting the numbers drastically of people detained, and then using that as precedent to call for abolition of detention in its totality. The way that we had usually organized is by making alliances with allies within the communities, going into schools, and actually making the public aware of the realities of detention and its impacts on individuals. We also lobbied a lot of ministers to support the idea. The biggest challenge for me was the idea that detention is out of sight, out of mind. So a lot of people are not aware where even if they live close to one, they're not aware where it is. Detention centers are often out in the middle of nowhere. And this awareness, a public awareness strategy that we used over a number of years was something that was successful. However, the introduction or the Brexit, after the Brexit vote and the threat of Europeans being potentially being subject to being detained, actually helped to actually bring the topic onto the wider agenda. Currently, there are a few ways, and actually, I'm really glad that Helen got to speak before me. I attended a number of their trial sessions, and one of the things that my team was very dissatisfied with was the level of public outcry. We expected for a much bigger public outcry, because the Home Office works on the assumption that they deport individuals for the safety of UK citizens. Yet you have a number of UK citizens willing to put their very life at risk for these individuals that the government want to deport. And this is interesting, the way the law works. We have to remind ourselves that it is law that made it lawful to make somebody a slave or not. The same laws that put up artificial borders to keep a group of people out, specifically the global south, those from the global south. The way I look at going forward, and I hope I'm not taking too much time, but the way I look at going forward is how we are looking for solicitors at the minute to help structure how expert by experience in the community can work independently so that their voices are not being filtered and they are also not used. We have a system currently where even in the charity sector, in the migrant sector, individuals become the commodities for charities to basically raise money and do their work. But the work that they're doing, for me, is not effective. It needs a proper legal understanding of what can be challenged and what cannot be. And there's also needs to be, for me, my understanding is that we need to come out of our individual silos and be able to connect with the issue more broadly. So one of the things that I've been thinking about recently is working closely with the disarmament community, looking to working around ways to disarm the weapons industry. So the idea is to find lawyers to help us to work around. If we look at countries that produce and sell weapons the most, those countries are the ones who actually refuse to take most migrants or refugees in their countries. So the idea is to work around which ways that we can force individual states to either stop selling the weapons in the first place, or to force them to take refugees in their countries and abolish detention. This is a much of a bigger dream, but it's one that I believe that is achievable, and we have to actually dream big. We have to think and imagine the world as a global, small communities in a global to make one state, essentially. And this idea that if we look at the word even migrant, this idea that a migrant only, that label only fits certain group of people, the connotation around it is problematic. You know, why is it that a British person is not a migrant, even though they travel, live, work, and do the same things that individuals, coming here do? We also have to, and this will be my last point, have to understand that in terms of climate, at the minute, the UN, in terms of refugee, there's a list of issues that individuals can claim asylum on. But what about the environment? What are people living in a country that the environment is actually danger to them? They can't grow food. They can't have the necessity to actually give them the basic rights and needs. Why are those individuals not classed as refugees? So the legality around these issues, and I believe lawyers joining this movement have to think radically, not just follow the same concepts of the law, because laws are written by men, they're not divine. So we have to think radically in how we challenge and how we build new laws that in the future do not also cause harm. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. That was really, really cool to hear about. I especially think the last point is important. I'm sure it was probably discussed in the previous panel as well, discussing the idea of a climate refugee and actually how that language might also be a narrow construct, and maybe just climate devastation should be something that people are helped with by like the global north specifically, should be funding the global south to be able to, assist with climate justice in many ways. But I'm sure that was discussed previously, so I don't want to reiterate that again for the audience. But thank you so much, Michael. That was really helpful.